the more you risk, the more you have to gain. And I'm a competitive guy. I grew up in a football family, and so I think that challenge is interesting for me, to be able to build something that I can call my own and not necessarily just be building it for somebody else.
My name's Mike Lacey, but I have Danny Holmoe here.
Yeah.
If you don't know Danny yet, you will soon. But of course, he has a famous last name in BYU and 49er and Cal Berkeley and even Stanford lore. Tom Holmoe is your father.
Yep.
I don't want to define you by your parents, but they're who I know. I mean, I used to be on the field with your father, Tom, and what a great family.
Yeah, happy to be connected to him, and happy to be
so
here.
You still claim them?
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Even though he's not the athletic director now, or
I know we're a little nervous as a family that all of our perks are going to dry up now that he's gone. So,
well, we'll talk about perks drying up,
yeah,
and what your present
for
things
sure
are. But there's so many things leading up to that. So, yeah, you're nervous as a family because the perks of not having. Maybe you've had some good seats or tickets.
Yeah, great seats, good access. It's what we've done our whole lives as a family, going to BYU sporting events, and previous to that, going to Cal games and going to 49er games as a child. And so it's all we've known forever is football and sports and BYU for the last 20 plus years.
When I retired from my career, and I was in finance, but it's a hard thing. I mean, it's almost like, hey, my identity or part of my identity was in this role as a leader or whatever I did.
For sure.
How's your father going to handle that? He's a humble man, I know.
Yeah.
But that has to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, we'll see. He said a couple times when people have asked, like, what are you going to do? He's talked about how he doesn't really have any hobbies outside of, BYU sports and going to games and watching football and basketball and all of.
Do I have to invite him out to golf?
He golfs a little bit.
I play, you might say I golf a little bit.
Yeah,
too.
that's me as well. So my dad and I are pretty competitive on the golf course because we both shoot, mid 90s. And so,
well, good. I'm going to invite you and your dad and we'll have a good game.
Yeah, no, that's great. We love getting out there and, being out on the course, but we're definitely not someone who you want to invite to join your scramble if you're wanting to win.
I bet being a Holmoe that you're still being a little bit humble there. My son, we'll switch right to this swag thing, but my son Michael owns actually two sons own startup companies.
Yeah.
So one of the companies is buying swag, which is a term for the gifts or cool stuff that you can wear.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, Danny Holmoe or Rec League is the best swag you can get anywhere." Why would my son say that?
I think it's because we, hang our hat on quality. We do a lot of research in everything that we do to make sure that the fabrics and the fits and the materials are all top notch. And so I think as the designer and as the production guy, I value the thought and the story and the quality of the product. So,
well, that leads to a question, and I've skipped ahead several chapters.
No,
but we'll
feel free to go wherever you want.
Trey Stewart came here. Do you know Trey?
I do. Yeah, I know Trey.
Trey is in a unique environment where he likes to create, I think, unique pieces of fashion.
For sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
How does that relate to what you do?
Yeah, it relates. They're doing great stuff, Trey and his team. And similarly, I think the desire is to just get really cool stuff out to Cougar Nation. We want, BYU to be, let's call it the swaggiest fan base in the country. And so, that's the goal.
How do we find, Rec League?
Yeah, so we have a shop that's actually kitty corner to Lavelle Edwards Stadium.
Really?
That's opened on game days. It's a brick and mortar store.
Now, kitty corner from the stadium, so that used to be or is not, isn't that a gas station?
Yeah, so it's right next door to the gas station.
Okay.
So there's an apartment complex called Freehand, and at the end of the apartment complex, there's one little shop, storefront that faces University Parkway. And so we've leased that building because it's the perfect location.
Is it open all the time?
It's not open all the time. We're going to figure out kind of what the hours are going to be and the days but on game days we're there and we're ready to accept all of the, loyal fans. We're also trying to work with some of the visiting teams to make sure that, when they visit BYU, that they can have something to pick up and have a good experience while they're here at Lavelle Edwards Stadium as well.
Interesting, because you'd have to advertise somehow or get the word out.
For sure.
A Baylor fan. I assume you're making a Baylor piece, right?
Yeah. So we're working with
their own swag.
Yeah. So we're looking to have fun with it. I like the fact that BYU is kind of getting the reputation as a fan base that people enjoy interacting with when they're here for games.
I do too.
I think it's fun. I think like having that friendly competitiveness, but making sure that they feel welcomed when they're here is something that Cougar Nation does a great job at. I'd say like the only team that I'd say we keep our distance from might be Utah, but other than that, have fun. And yeah.
I wonder if you made Utah, if you had a teasing thing with Utah, like, I don't know. I mean, top of mind, sell them swag that had something not derogatory,
no,
but
for
silly
sure,
or funny.
We actually do make Utah gear.
That.
We actually do make Utah gear, and I've always joked that I should have some sort of Easter egg in the hat or in the apparel that says something like "Go BYU," but I didn't. But when we get those stuff in, I never put it on because I'm a little superstitious and don't want to get my picture taken wearing Utah gear. So.
Good point. You get in trouble. Dad and mom. Thanksgiving
for sure.
might be. No, I've jumped forward several chapters here, but that's exciting about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Are you online?
We are. Yeah. So we also sell online at recleague.co, and that's going to be crucial as we expand into other universities and things like that, where we don't have, a storefront right next to the stadium.
Do you have a lot of inventory?
We do. Most of the things that we come out with, we try to have it, exclusive to where we're not sitting on inventory all the time, but also make sure that if you want something that you can get it as long as you, set your reminder on your phone.
My son has shared some of his swag that from his company that you've done for them.
Yeah.
And swears by you guys that you're the best.
Yeah, so we do corporate merch for a lot of companies, both here in Utah and all over the United States. So we're right now working with the X Games to do all of the merch for their upcoming event here in Salt Lake City.
Awesome. So Danny Holmoe, your parents were both involved in sports. Your mom was a cheerleader, and I remember her, and she and Tom were dating, and Tom and I were on the team together. You chose business.
Yeah.
Why weren't you out there beating up on people on the football field?
I think some of it was genetics. My dad married a cheerleader, and so when I was in high school, I played football and ran track and was pretty good. But
was this in California?
So I actually moved to Provo when my dad joined BYU again, and I was a junior in high school. So I attended high school in California for 2 years in the Bay Area, Aragon High School. Went to high school with Manasseh Tonga, who
really
played at BYU.
He's a big man.
Yeah, big guy. We actually shared the same number because he was on varsity and I was on the Frosh Soft team, and so we were both number 5 at the time. And so,
Wow.
We went to early morning seminary together, and yeah, so we knew each other in the Bay Area, and then he came to BYU to play, and I came to BYU to study. So,
What'd you study?
I studied advertising within the communications department, and great program at BYU. They have the Ad Lab, which is pretty world renowned, I'd say, for college ad programs. So.
But I saw that you had a lot of choices. There were sexy choices and not so sexy. Tell us about when you were choosing to go into your career. Why did you choose where you chose? We haven't talked about that yet, but what were your choices? What were the things you were looking at?
In terms of after college, what
Yes.
I would do? Yeah, so I actually was scheduled to move back to San Francisco to join a startup company. It was a startup company founded by, one of Cougar Nation's very own Mick Hagan. And I was scheduled to move out there, and then I started to...
Is that still a startup, or what are they doing now?
He's done a bunch of different things, super successful guy. That one is no longer going, but you don't want to, bet against Mick Hagan because he's going to win. So,
what industry?
That was in like the social media realm.
Okay.
But now he's pretty heavily in the crypto space.
Really?
Yeah. Before he had sold a company that was in like the academic tech space, and so pretty smart guy.
Let me just, my generation, your father's generation.
Yeah.
We came into the world and things were more structured. Social media, it was a newspaper.
Yeah.
It was always 24 hours late, pretty much.
For sure.
Yeah. And that's how you got your news.
Yeah.
And unless you were Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, and really they weren't entrepreneurs so much as people who had something that started at the right time.
Yeah.
And, there weren't many entrepreneurs. There were, but not many. The opportunities weren't there.
Yeah.
So you went into law, you went into being a doctor, you went into sales, but you were with a big company generally.
Definitely.
But the opportunities for you young people,
Yeah.
where I think of, and I was in the stock market, so I think of NVIDIA.
Yep.
Who knew of NVIDIA
Wow.
10 years ago?
Yeah, it's been a crazy ride.
Now it's one of the biggest companies in the world. So technology has maybe evened out the playing field to where the opportunities for you guys are just crazy.
Yeah. No, it's great.
So you landed where?
I landed at Qualtrics. So I was scheduled to move out.
All right. For those unknowing, Qualtrics is obviously the company started by Ryan Smith and his father, or the family.
Yep.
Right. And technology.
Yeah.
And now owners of the Utah Jazz and big BYU fans.
Oh, yeah.
Also.
For sure.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You started with Qualtrics.
Yeah. So I was going to be moving to San Francisco, and then I started dating this girl here in Provo. And
where's she from?
She's from the Bay Area, but she was playing soccer at BYU. And so we started dating, and the time was approaching where I was going to be moving to San Francisco, and I decided to stay here in Utah and kind of pivot my early career. And so I didn't know.
And this is to, kind of stay close to your girlfriend.
Stay
right?
close to my girlfriend and see where that went. And so I needed to find a gig here in Utah. So I met with a few people within the tech space, and one of them happened to be Ryan Smith. And so when I met with him...
What year was this?
This was around 2010, 2011, I would say. Yeah, so quite a while
They
ago.
weren't in their garage.
No, but there were about 125 employees.
So it was a much smaller company.
Much smaller company. They
And
had
Please tell us what Qualtrics does.
Yeah, so Qualtrics, they're a tech company that focuses on helping companies to get feedback. So some people say survey software. It can be much more than that. It's in the customer experience arena. It's in the employee experience arena. So anytime that you're having some sort of experience, whether it be in your workplace or whether you take a flight and get a survey after saying how your experience was.
You guys are the one bothering us.
Generally, yeah, Qualtrics is the one that's going to be getting that survey out to you.
Okay. And then from that survey, all sorts of good things can happen, right?
Yeah, and I haven't been there for a few years, and because tech, moves at such a rapid pace, I'm sure they're, doing much more now than they were even when I left. And I know they're like getting into the AI space and things like that.
Yeah.
So, cool to watch them from afar.
So, I mean, you were relatively new. I mean, not new, but you were relatively one of the earliest employees. How many employees do you think Qualtrics has now?
I think probably around 6,000. I don't know,
but still relative to IBM or something like that. I mean,
for
it's
sure,
still smaller, but you were, in the first 100 or 200 people.
Yeah.
Were you, as an early adopter, an early employee at Qualtrics? Maybe it's unfair for me to ask, but were you able to get some stock in that company?
Yeah, I was able to get some stock. Definitely, helped as a young married guy with a young family to kind of level up. Definitely, can't retire, but it was definitely
a help
for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure people were talking to you. Qualtrics looks like a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to open Rec League?
I think part of the reason why I joined that team and started Rec League was just so that I could have a little bit of flexibility. I have a bunch of kids, and I wanted to be able to...
How many children do you have?
I have 3, 10, 7, and 4.
You're busy.
Yeah, and so I wanted to be able to coach my son's football team and be at, certain events and whatnot.
So it's kind of a lifestyle?
Lifestyle. So when you're an entrepreneur, it's 24/7, but you kind of get to pick, when you can take breaks.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times I'll be working, late into the night, but then, at 4:00 I can coach my son's football team. And when you have a 9 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever it is, the flexibility isn't always there. So I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to entrepreneurship, is because you kind of get to take care of business whenever you can.
And my heavens, with AI, the lines of hierarchies are really getting thinner.
Yeah.
So that you can control a lot more.
Yeah.
With your technology.
For sure. And I think another reason why I wanted to do something on my own was that the more you risk, the more you have to gain. And I'm a competitive guy. I grew up in a football family, and so I think that challenge is interesting for me, to be able to build something that I can call my own and not necessarily just be building it for somebody else. So.
That's fascinating, and someone who's a little bit older and maybe more conservative. I never considered myself conservative, financially, but when I look at someone like, a good example to me is Elon Musk. A guy started from nothing and built this and built that. He was involved with PayPal. And so from that, he created all these things and took extraordinary risk. I mean, with Tesla, if he went under, it was all going to be over, and he easily could have gone under.
Yeah.
But, he just kept taking that risk. And so to me, that's a little bit what you or my son are doing, is you're taking these risks for the opportunities. Is it the opportunity or is it the challenge? What's bigger for you?
I think they kind of go hand in hand. I like the challenge, but I also think that I like the opportunity. Roll the dice and see what happens.
No, and when Ryan Smith and his father were working on this Qualtrics idea, what an esoteric thing, we're going to do surveys.
Yeah.
you know, and that small little niche creates jobs, creates opportunities for hundreds, thousands of people now.
Yeah.
And so to me, we're getting way off course here, but people talk about AI. Oh, everyone's going to lose their jobs. No. The economy keeps growing. It's like planting a seed, and you don't know when the buggy whip people lost their jobs, they didn't know that they were going to get better jobs.
Yeah.
And so your technology maybe makes the lines of hierarchy smaller and thinner, but the opportunities outside just expand exponentially.
For sure. Yeah,
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do. And, as a designer, a lot of designers kind of put their feet in the ground and say, AI is bad for us. But I've used AI a lot recently in my design process, whether it's, concepting ideas or getting things that I wouldn't be able to create on my own, and then using my creative ability to add to it. I think can be a really powerful tool, and something that I'm not afraid of, but something that I'm wanting to embrace and try and use it to help me reach like a greater potential than I would have on my own.
Perfect. I love that. And there's so much truth to that. You had some really cool things that you were involved in. The X4 conference.
Yeah.
What was that? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the X4 conference is Qualtrics' user summit where clients and prospects would get together in Salt Lake City for breakout sessions and main keynote speakers and things like that. And I was, part of the small marketing team that brought that to life back in the day. And so we would always have some pretty eventful keynote speakers. President Obama came, Ashton Kutcher, a lot of big people, and then we would always have a concert, whether it was Elton John or Imagine Dragons or Maroon 5. So it's kind of a party.
You were kind of in charge of that.
Yeah, so I was part of the team.
It was a party, though. I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No. I was part of the team that kind of set that up. I was on the creative team, and so I was in charge of getting that all ready to go for people to come into Salt Lake and have a good time.
How fun would that be?
Yeah.
Love Imagine Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
Elton John from the old days.
Oh, yeah.
President Obama was a great speaker.
Yeah.
Could really connect with his audiences.
For sure.
Something about your philosophy was you can't ever say that that's not my job.
Yeah.
What do you mean? You can't ever say that's not my job.
Yeah, I think that was
talking about within your core. What was that?
I think that was something that Ryan instilled, kind of that startup mindset to where you could be whatever you wanted to be, but you also needed to be able to wear a lot of hats.
Willing to jump in and do.
Yeah, so if you had an idea, no one was going to stop you, but you were kind of going to have to figure it out. And I think with the X4 event specifically, we wanted to have a white glove experience. And so sometimes, it was counting chairs. Sometimes it was staying up all night to help Ryan get ready for his keynote. Sometimes it was working the meet and greet line. But it was always step up and make sure that everyone has the greatest experience that they could possibly have at that event.
It'd be hard for me. I'm from the Beatles generation, and they were big. But Imagine Dragons in Salt Lake, that would be pretty fun.
Yeah,
I'd be more fan than I would be. You go plug this in, or take this garbage out, or what was that like being on the set or setting stuff like that up with President Obama?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. A couple stories, one with Imagine Dragons and one with President Obama. So when Imagine Dragons was doing their performance, I was actually backstage taking everything down because I was ready to get out of there. You don't sleep very much the week before X4, and so I was listening to music that they were
running on fumes.
Yeah, I was listening to the music as they were performing, probably about 50 feet away from me, but I was kind of taking down the set backstage that we used for the meet and greet and things like that. And I was, packing up. So pretty interesting that there was like a huge concert with, maybe 10,000 people.
All this enthusiasm and joy going.
And I was just ready to get out of there. But it was pretty cool to think like, oh, they're giving this big concert like 30 feet away from me. But I'm just, casually working on getting things wrapped up. And then with President Obama, I was tasked with the meet and greet line, making sure that no one, was too enthusiastic as they were going through the line or, trying to get a hug or anything like that. And so I worked together with his team for that meet and greet. And so,
well, he would have had Secret Service people there.
Yeah. So at one point it was me, President Obama, his Secret Service guy, and his like chief of staff. And so I was standing there thinking like, man, this is a pretty surreal moment that I'm like, just standing there with President Obama, his Secret Service guy, and his chief of staff, just waiting for this meet and greet to start. So
that's amazing. I love that. Danny Holmoe, entrepreneur, friend of Ryan Smith, who we as Cougar fans are all appreciative of.
Yeah.
What would you like to share with us as far as, for example, when you're at a BYU game, are you there as the son of the athletic or ex-athletic director, or are you a fan? What's it feel like when you're there at an event that your family's been so entrenched in?
Yeah, I would say we're definitely fans first. But I would say like the emotional connection to the outcome of the game might be different. I can't say, because I have always been emotionally connected to it, beyond just the outcome of the game. It's like, this is my family's livelihood. This is what my dad has put all of his time and effort and energy into. And so when things were good, they were really good. And when things were bad, it was hard. There was a time when he was coaching at Cal when things weren't going well, and it was really hard for me, both as a fan, but also as a son, to see, what he was going through, and to wake up in the morning and read the front page of the newspaper that said, fire Holmoe now. And so I would say we're all fans. We bleed blue and, whatnot, but I think there's a little extra motivation on the positive side, and then a little extra sting when things aren't going well.
I grew up in Northern California, and Cal and Stanford have had interesting pasts. It's not always the easiest place to coach or be involved. The 49ers, your dad's involvement with Bill Walsh and George Seifert and all his coaching staffs, and to be involved with Stanford, to be the head, work up to becoming the head coach at Cal in a school that was maybe more difficult to coach at than if you were the head coach at USC.
Yeah.
So there are going to be those times of adversity, and as a child in the family, and I know your dad is a soft-spoken gentleman, that had to be interesting and hard. How did your mom deal with, fan bases, whether it's at BYU or at Cal, that are sometimes being a little bit derogatory, if not a lot derogatory?
Yeah, I think we all had to develop thick skin because you were kind of in the spotlight, or at least my dad was in the spotlight. And so, they'd sit us down and, teach us lessons about adversity and having thick skin. But, with some of those hard times also came some times where, we got access or things like that no one else had. Or, I had a childhood that lots of little boys would have, killed for, dreamed of, being able to run into the locker room and hang out with all of the guys and be on the field. And one of the things that I remember at Cal is like, I would always run out onto the field with the team when they broke the huddle.
Really?
Like, that just seems like something that, most people don't ever get the opportunity to do.
Think about that.
Yeah.
And I've been in, the Cal Bears, I mean, they recruited me. I don't know what they call their stadium.
Memorial Stadium.
Memorial Stadium, that's right. To run out on the field would be so amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, as a player, it's amazing.
For sure.
With your jersey on. And
yeah.
You were telling me earlier about a story. We think of these organizations, especially in this day of NIL and everything, as being so large and monolithic. But you said that as a young boy, you went to your dad's practices sometimes.
Yeah.
And that what happened at the practices, you told me earlier.
I can't remember what I was telling you earlier, but
the old man that came up to
you. Yeah. So there was an old man who was at a lot of the practices and also at the summer training camp. And we just developed a relationship. I was a kid and he was probably, 80 years old. And he would quiz me on the cities of the Pac-10 schools. So I knew that Washington State was in Pullman, and I knew that Oregon State was in Corvallis, and that was just a fun interaction that I had with a fan. But I would say, like, in terms of going to practices and hanging out at the facilities, I think that was like the one place where I was able to kind of hang out with my dad, because as a coach, you are busy. You go to work at 6 a.m. and come home at 9 at night. And so I didn't get to see my dad during the day very often. And so in the summers, I would wake up with him at 6 a.m. and would go, to Berkeley and run around all day.
Where did you live when he coached?
We lived in Foster City, so it was across the bay. It took about 45 minutes to get to Berkeley.
He would drive.
So we would have that.
Wouldn't take Bart.
No, so we would have that morning to chat in the car. We would, play Name That Tune, where he would have his program stations and I would have my program stations. And so he would have to start to learn who Snoop Dogg was and who Dr. Dre was. And I would have to start to learn, Earth, Wind, and Fire and Eric Clapton to be able to compete with one another.
Oh, how fun. Father, son, Foster City to Berkeley, across the Bay Bridge.
Yeah.
And traffic could be pretty tight sometimes.
Yeah. From time to time, traffic would be tight. And so those rides were, where I kind of grew my relationship with my dad. We would always, say a prayer on the way to work. And sometimes we would, listen to scriptures on tape, because that's how he,
in
would
between
do it.
Eric Clapton and
we
not AC/DC.
Yeah, we would probably start with a prayer, listen to a chapter, and then we would get into name that tune.
Oh, so those are special times. Your father ran in some cool circles. I mean, he played with guys like Ronnie Lott and Steve Young, and all these teammates who, to us as fans, they're numbers and bigger than life, on the TV screen. And here you got to meet some of these people face to face.
Yeah, definitely.
In person.
Yeah, Ronnie Lott's a good family friend. He's come to a few BYU games and sat in our box.
Really?
He's a big BYU fan. Yeah.
Wow. Steve Young told a wonderful story about Ronnie Lott and coming to Steve Young's defense at a time when Steve was, was going through a lot of adversity in his football career.
Yeah.
Being back up to Joe Montana wasn't easy.
For sure. Yeah, Ronnie Lott's a great guy.
Ronnie Lott talk about adversity. I was watching the game when he broke his finger.
Yeah, crazy story. Yeah.
Maybe that's the, PG-13 version of Beyond the Game.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But do you have any other situations like that you'd like to share? Because you were used to being, your father and mother, Lori and Tom, always seemed like very humble, mild, good, common people. They'd be good neighbors,
Yeah.
And yet they ran in circles that were
in
rarefied air for the rest of us.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of people know the, coaching prowess that my dad had when he was, a football coach. So when he coached at Stanford, his first coaching job, he coached the safeties and the defensive backs. And one of his...
Was Bill Walsh the head coach? Or...
Bill Walsh was the head coach. One of his safeties was John Lynch.
Wow.
Who ended up playing, in the NFL and is now the GM of the San Francisco 49ers. And then he went to the 49ers and coached Deion Sanders and Merton Hanks and Eric Davis. There was a year when he was coaching at the 49ers where five of his defensive backs made the Pro Bowl.
No, that was one of the best defenses, and Tom was coaching.
For sure.
How cool is that?
Yeah, and then he went to Cal and switched a guy named Deltha O'Neal from running back to corner, and Deltha O'Neal ended up being a first-round draft pick at corner. And then he coached Nnamdi Asomugha at Cal, and he ended up being a first-round draft pick as a safety to I don't know where he was drafted, but ended up playing for the Raiders and the Eagles, and I believe I can't remember.
But Deion Sanders,
yeah,
it seems like you had a story about Deion Sanders.
Yeah, Deion was my childhood idol. I looked up to him as an athlete.
Right? Okay,
and I loved Deion before he played for my dad and before he was on the 49ers. When he was on the Falcons, he was my favorite player, and so when he joined the 49ers and was going to be, a player that my dad had a responsibility to coach, I was over the moon. And so I got to meet him.
Sanders coachable, though?
Yeah, for sure.
Of course.
He worked harder than anybody at practice, and he is a competitor. And so he always was, going to make sure that he was ready to go, come Sunday. One story that I remember about Deion that kind of goes back to like the random access that you get as a coach's son. We went to a baseball game when Deion was playing because he was my favorite player.
Well, and for those unaware, Deion Sanders was a great Major League Baseball player too.
Yeah,
he was one of the guys that was playing both ways.
Yeah.
Who was the other one who injured his hip?
Bo Jackson.
Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
Who could play both sports at the next level.
Yeah. Danny Ainge is another one.
Danny Ainge, perfect example. But tell us, though, about you went to the baseball game.
So we went to a baseball game because Deion was going to be playing, and I wanted to go, and so my dad got us tickets, and Deion hit a home run on the first pitch of the game. He was the leadoff batter, and so it was awesome. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't in the game anymore. He left in, the fourth or fifth inning. And so my dad said, let's go to the locker room and see if we can see him. So we went to the locker room, and at, I believe it was Candlestick Park at the time where they were playing.
Great place to watch a baseball game, right?
Yeah,
That's where I always went.
Yeah.
Being from Sacramento.
For sure.
Man. Wow.
For sure. And the security was the same for the 49er games and the Giants games. And so they knew him. So my dad said, is Deion back there? And they said, yeah. And so they let him in. And we sat and talked to Deion for,
Was he injured?
2 innings. He was just getting a break because he played, both sports. And, so the game was decided probably one way or the other. And so they subbed him out. And we talked to him for, a couple innings about life and religion and family. And it was like such a cool moment for me because I had, grown up watching him play and idolizing him. And we had this, real deep personal conversation with him. And I was just sitting there going like, man, this is so cool.
No, really? I mean, this adds a whole new element of not complexity, but interestingness.
Yeah.
I was at that Colorado game. The bowl game, the Alamo Bowl. As a Cougar fan, wow, awesome. But we were walking around San Antonio for days, and the number of fans, Deion Sanders has brought such an element of devotion or fan involvement. I mean, you could tell some of these people were just wearing all their swag, their big old gold chains and their black and gold or buffalo stuff, and they're avid fans, but not bad fans. They were good fans to walk around with. But Deion Sanders brought so much. I ran into your dad. I was running down before the end of the game, and he was running out I just said hi. I knew he was busy as the athletic director.
Yeah.
But now this complexity to me is he loves you love Deion Sanders.
Oh, yeah.
And yet our team had just kind of humiliated. No, that's not a fair, but great game.
Yeah.
What did you feel? What do you think your dad felt?
I mean, I think
Deion Sanders.
I think
being
all
on the
those
other
guys are
side.
competitors.
They are.
So they want to win, but you know, you compete and you wanna play your best.
Even though
game
he's
and
your
win.
brother, your friend, your ally.
But after the game, you know, I think they
Give
go
him a
back
hug.
to being brothers and give each other hugs and make sure that they're doing okay, and then it's on to the next one.
It is. It's fun to have a program that's getting so many national accolades.
Yeah.
You know, and Deion has done a wonderful job with
the
Buffalo.
That's why he's called Primetime, because wherever he is, the lights and the cameras follow.
All right, you're in marketing.
Yeah.
You know your stuff there. What has Deion Sanders done? What does he do?
He just
that
has
draws that positive attention.
He has a remarkable personal brand. He is so charismatic, and he says things the right way, and he puts himself in the positions where, you know, people want to follow what he's doing. And it's awesome to watch him as a coach, kind of change the game a little bit and make it, you know, more entertaining than, you know, just the game itself.
Than just, you know, X's and O's.
For sure.
Well, wow. That's fascinating that you were in the locker room. You, your dad, and Deion Sanders are talking about life.
Yeah.
And you as a young man and fan are just sapping all that stuff in.
Yeah, soaking it all up.
Soaking it in.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Danny Holmoe, man, you we could talk a long time about your life experiences. What you know, with your branding here, I mean, what amount of your swag and efforts goes towards a BYU fan base versus, you know, a national base? What are you trying to do?
I'd say we started at home, which is BYU, and because of the system that we have in place and the network, BYU makes sense to, you know, push a little bit harder than the rest.
But you still want to expand.
But with that being said, we're wanting to expand
Except
nationally.
for that the Ute stuff, right?
No, we'll get the Utah, you know, some good gear, but I just won't be caught wearing it.
Or it's going to be in a dark room with no camera. No,
for sure. We actually, we did a photo shoot with some of the Utah guys, and I talked to them and got to know them well. And so, for instance, Smith Snowden, he modeled for our Utah Rec League
supposed to be
stuff.
a shutdown corner,
and great guy, shutdown corner. So I'm a fan of his. Yeah, for sure.
Well, not too much though.
Yeah.
No, I know it's fair to be
11 weeks out of the 12. I'm a Smith Snowden fan. So
I love that, and that's totally fair. Kyle Whittingham was a great teammate of mine.
Yeah.
When Tom and I and Kyle and a bunch of other really good players played together. And it's interesting that we can be competitive, like when you talk about BYU versus Colorado, and yet we have a great respect for each other. It's like brothers,
for sure.
You know, playing one-on-one basketball, you know.
Yeah.
Do you tell us how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 3 siblings, so a younger brother, an older sister, and a younger sister.
Were you competitive with your siblings?
Yeah, so a couple of my siblings are competitive and a couple of them aren't. And so, you know, depending on which sibling it is, you know, I'll pull it up or pull it back. But we have some family categories games that, you know, get a little out of hand because of the...
Is this with your mom and dad too?
Yeah.
Okay.
The competitive nature of some of the people in my family, you know, categories gets a little out of hand sometimes.
We need to find out about the Holmoe family categories on another time. Danny, you're very enjoyable to meet with. I hope that our fan base can reach out, and all of us enjoy the swag, the top of the line swag that my son swears by.
Yeah.
What would you like to share with us if you were Coach Prime and we had those couple of innings, you know, where you're finally relaxing from, hey, I had a football game, a baseball game, and now I get to visit with my friend Tom Holmoe. What would you share with us? What are your between the innings thoughts, comments for Cougar Nation?
Yeah, I'd say that like my dad loves people. First and foremost, that's what made him a great athletic director, I think, is because he cared for each one of those student athletes. And, it didn't matter if you were the superstar on the team or someone that never saw the field. He cared about you as a person and wanted to make sure that you were doing well, that your family was doing well, that your spiritual journey was, going in the right direction. And if there was anything that he could do to help, he would help you. So I think even in that moment where we were sitting down with Deion, I could sense that love that my dad had for his player in that moment. And I think that bled over to him as an athletic director, loving and caring for the people that he was a steward over. But he looked at it more from a one-on-one relationship perspective rather than like an occupational duty, I would say.
I can testify to that. I have a daughter who back 2010, 2009 was on the track team. I remember there was a year she was injured. There was a year where one of her best friends was killed in an auto accident, another track star, lady BYU Cougar. And Tom, my daughter told me, and I witnessed it myself, he knew all their names.
Yeah.
And he would pay attention to each of these youth, these children of, but these students at BYU who were part of his, and I'm sure that there are other athletic directors nationwide who, look at it more as a business and probably didn't know a lot of the names except for the stars. Tom knew the names of all the kids, and that's neat.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy feat to do.
Yeah, he'd be at as many games as he could possibly go to.
And still has been.
And it didn't matter if it was, revenue generating or not. He was going to be there and he was going to be all in and he was going to support those student athletes. And, whether it was women's golf or football, he was going to give it his all. So
I love it. Well, Danny, it's obvious that you're carrying those same values in what you're doing. We wish you the best, and thank you for being with us on Beyond the Game.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you for watching another episode of Beyond the Game. Remember to click here to subscribe and click here to watch our recent videos. Also, please follow us on social media. And remember, go Cougs.